opportunity is re-engineering of education. Its delivery, policies around the delivery of education, what we would consider standards, and it's coming at the right time when government actually was in the process of rolling out CBC, which actually is CBE, competency, we call it competency-based curriculum, but we're not just talking about curriculum here, it's competency-based education.
Yes.
It is a good opportunity for us here. But one of the short-term interventions, just to manage the psychology of parents, and also to manage the psychology of the students, especially those who are taking exams. We are an exam-based education system, and I hope that's gonna change as well.
Yeah.
We have standard 8, which is class 8, or grade 8. We have class 7, grade 12, which is form 4. These are candidate classes. So I want you to actually put this in the context of Corona, the COVID-19 protocols, social distancing, washing your hands regularly to the extent that is possible, wearing masks, and all the related COVID protocol items. I was suggesting in the short term that the Ministry of Education and the government at large actually could get our candidates back into the schools. Any school that has Form 1 to Form 4
Yes.
has enough infrastructure
Yes.
for the application of COVID protocol for the candidates class.
Yes.
That is Form 4. Any school that has class 1 to 8 has sufficient space for the candidates class also to actually observe the COVID protocol, up to including their teachers.
Yes.
So that teachers should be back in school, supporting the candidates class, so the candidates do not actually have to lose much. Because the reality, before you even go to talk about the future of education, the reality is that COVID is here to stay.
Yes.
We're going to actually open our schools, whether we like it or not, with COVID alongside within us in the environment. And if they could do that and put these girls and boys back in school, look at what it would do to the economy as well.
Yes.
Apart from the health of the parents, the health of the students, the other ones can actually stay home for a little longer. What it would do is that the teachers would then now basically create content and be able to interact with the students who are at home in the other classes. But the teachers would also use this opportunity to learn about new delivery methods of teaching and learning technologically. So the government should actually invest in that. But then we would now use 2020 as the last year where we're actually doing these traditional, doing these exams in the traditional fashion. Because I really think that these exams should be computer-based to begin with. Multiple choice, I don't see why multiple choice we're still doing on paper. I don't understand, not certainly in the 21st, what I call 31st century technologically. So some of these things should change. But in addition to that, it would also help suppliers. It would also help, because this is how you actually begin to do what we call the smart opening, the smart re-engineering of the economy. Because we will never have an opportunity whereby we push back 3,000 students in the same school. It'll not happen. And so we can now begin to think of how do we deal with this, because I don't see from every mouth, every technical person, expert in health is telling us we're not going to have this, we might not have the vaccine or the cure be south of 18 months or south of 12 months. That's a long time. But as I conclude my thoughts on education, this is now the time for every university, every college, technical college, colleges, high schools, primary schools, to re-engineer this whole process of delivery of learning, especially using technology. That is what we have to do. You know, unfortunately, it is happening today. I can tell you that my daughter's education has not been interrupted. She's doing her 12th grade, but because she's doing it online, she's fine. It's only that maybe, you know, the center she used to go, she no longer goes there, she's doing it at home. That is the little challenge that she has. But not every child in this country has that opportunity, is that privileged.
That is correct.
Like my daughter, but I'm saying from a practical point of view that it is possible, because why? My daughter is doing it. She's doing it in Kenya. Why can't we basically be able to deploy that and use it across board? That is the thinking that actually also needs to happen. Even as the president sets up his, you know, post-corona COVID response team, I think that Professor Magoha should actually also have that, not just show up and say, we think that maybe another month.
Yeah.
You know, is somebody I have a lot of respect for, but I think this is also the time that he actually should also put his team together and bring in a few other minds to actually help him discuss how to address this, so that we don't behave like only those in government are the people with
monopoly of knowledge.
You know, that is. I don't know what your thoughts would be in education.
Let me first of all say that education is at the very heart of national development, and we have seen that the country has made a deliberate decision that to move in what we describe as competency-based curriculum, and you've rightly said should be education. And it presupposes, among other things, that the mode of instruction will rely very heavily on technology.
Absolutely.
But the reality in Kenya, as in most African countries, in terms of connectivity and penetration of the tools that we need, and even the training of personnel. We are talking about teachers who went to the colleges that you and me know about. These were people who were taught in an environment where technology was not a means of instruction. So we've got to talk about retraining of these teachers. We've got to talk about content. We've got to talk about the infrastructure. Because even in an urbanized setting such as Nairobi, if you were to do a proper count, you would discover that perhaps anything between 40 and 50% of the learning institutions, particularly in the public sector, are not ready. If you go to Eastlands and some parts of Nairobi here, I know schools where electricity was disconnected a long time ago.
40%?
I'm just being generous.
I'm wondering why.
I'm just being generous. But if you go to rural Kenya, the situation is even more pathetic. But one does not want to drown oneself in being in self-pity. Now that we have seen that that is the method of going about this, and I agree with you when you say that the laptop program was a good thing, but the so-called, I don't think it has failed, it has been delayed.
No, it has not failed.
I think that there is a sense in which it has delayed in terms of deployment. But going forward, and you are talking about the post-COVID environment, to me there are a number of things that we've got to think about. One, when we talk about the post-COVID environment, and we must agree that COVID is going to be with us. It is like any other disease and is going to be with us. We're like just going to reduce its effectiveness. So a number of things come to mind. One, that we have examinations. There is a category of Kenyan young men and women who have been preparing to take their examinations. They had better go back to school. And they had better go back to school because, as you said, if we accommodated the Form 4s and the Standard 8s, they are capable of being accommodated with sufficient social distancing or physical distancing. One may say that the teachers may be stretched because of that, but I think this is the time to sacrifice. And within the schools, you can actually deploy technology. You can
Yes.
actually have the students sitting in various classrooms,
Yeah.
and you engineer the environment where
Yes.
a teacher sits at one spot in
Yes.
their office and will actually be teaching all these other students for purpose of revision.
Yeah.
That, I think, should happen. But we should also look to the future a little. We have now introduced a system, for example, in the primary sector, where we are talking about 100% transition. When you talk about 100%
We
transition,
then should all be doing exams.
first of all, it renders the standard 8 exam useless exercise, because
Yeah.
everybody is going to Form 1 anyway.
Yeah.
So we've got to rethink, what does 100% transition mean? And if it means that everybody is moving forward anyway, why subject the young men and women to a national examination? Have a system of assessment and let them transit, so that we know our first major test of the students is at another grade. And if you do that, do you have the physical infrastructure?
Yeah.
Because you still need physical infrastructure even when you have technological intervention.
Yep.
So how are you going to ensure content development? The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, you talk to them more often than I do. I do not know their levels of preparedness in terms of content development. And yet, we are only thinking about primary school, we are thinking about secondary school. How are we connecting with universities? The university is also preparing for this 100% transition, which will increase transition, therefore, to the university in terms of infrastructure and in terms of technological deployment and in terms of the competency of the personnel, because it will be necessary to retrain people. At the university level, lecturers must now know how to upload their material into platforms. And the secondary schools, teachers must know how to upload this into material. The cost of training is going to be major, which calls into question something that we actually don't talk about. When we talk about governance in Kenya and in Africa, we always talk about political governance. We don't talk about governance in its totality and in its comprehensive sense. You've lived in the United States of America, and you've worked around education around the world. One of the things that the boards in education, if it is in the United States in a particular area, districts is going to be the body that deals with education in terms. Here, our governors are only dealing with ECD. I'm told the ECD is...
But that's what you said in the Constitution.
So, but remember, you asked the question very early on, where you said, is it not time to rethink about the things that we allow our governors or our counties to deal with? Can they deal with issues of education as long as you have a national standardization method? So there are very many issues. When I hear about BBI, and BBI is talking about creating offices. Sinecure offices of Prime Minister, that is not the issue. The BBI, if it is going to be useful to the people of Kenya, should be a process of re-examination of the Constitution for purposes of assessing 10 years down the line, how have we performed, and what are the things that we can do to improve governance in the critical areas that affect the quality of people's lives. In health, when we devolved certain aspects of health, are we the better in that sector? In education, are we the better in that sector? In agriculture, are we the better in that sector? And now with COVID and the post-COVID environment, knowing as we do that in terms of preventive and public health, because public health is going to take a lot of money from the people's pockets.
It's going to be number one.
Yes. Students are going to be asked to sanitize. Even in dormitories, you are not going to allow students to stay in the dormitories where you have six students in a dormitory.
and 3 levels of a decker
bed. 3 levels of double decker. You know, these are even the toilet facilities. The toilet facilities are having to have got to be different. And I expect, therefore, Professor Magoha in the Ministry of Education talking about Kenya, that this is the time not to rely only on your personnel. There are great brains out here who can think around these issues and augment whatever is in place. Is going to be major. It's going to be expensive. is going to be disruptive and is going to be something that we have never seen before. Countries such as Korea and Singapore can deal with them in the manner that they have dealt with them. But remember also, Mark, that we are going to have to grapple with the post-corona environment at a time where sections of our country, look at the entire Kisumu district in Kisumu County, the floods that have ravaged in that area. It means that many schools will not be ready for occupation because of the ongoing rains. Look at Budalangi in Western Province in Busia County. Look at Bomet and many others that we are not talking about now. You are going to engage in a rebuilding exercise.
I'm disappointed that you are not mentioning Lake Victoria.
Lake Victoria, Remba Island, which is not too far from your home, is consumed.
Remba is my home.
Yeah, Remba and many others. And we are just mentioning this where there was a big landslide the other day in Elgeyo Marakwet. And you go to Meru and other places. So this is the most, the greater the problem, the greater the glory. In these closing days of President Kenyatta's presidency, history has placed on the laps of his administration monumental problems. And those monumental problems will require statesmanship and firm hands on the vehicle of state, which cannot be torpedoed by short-term politicking.
I think, Prof, you mentioned BBI, and let me make a comment or two on BBI. I think that the way BBI was going before Corona was pathetic.
Oh yeah,
that was horrible. I don't think that there was anything that was going to meaningfully come out of that. And COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to actually re-examine how BBI should play.
Yes.
And even elements within aspects of the Constitution that actually we should revisit. Do you know that we are realizing that actually agriculture, which is actually going to be the mainstay of economic rebuilding of our nation, of Africa, going forward, and actually of the world, was devolved to the counties. But we have not seen good approaches originating from that sort of intervention of that sort of structure. So that is one thing we need to revisit. We also need to revisit health, the way it's actually devolved. And this is the time to actually bring it back. So talking about the president sitting on a driver's seat to actually re-engineer the whole process and help us reimagine Kenya, these are some of the things that actually need to actually pay attention to. I have to give credit to I call him my senior, Joe Msheru. I know there are a few things that he also need to work on. But you know, he's gone ahead and set up a COVID, not just a COVID response team, but that is an ICT.
Yes.
He's gone ahead to actually set up a task force that is already looking at how is ICT going to play a role in the rebuilding of Kenya. Because COVID is already here with us. So you can't say, how should ICT help us now in COVID? No.
Correct.
How can ICT help us post-corona, actually going forward? And that is one thing and that's the same thing that you're also suggesting that Magoa does. And in really every single ministry should actually do that, so that the president then coordinates all of these sort of
Mark,
ideas.
Lest our listeners think that we don't know. We know that the government has put together a cabinet subcommittee. We know that there are efforts that are already, we are simply saying that those efforts are not sufficient. We are saying that those efforts assume that it is business as usual. It is business unusual. And when it is business unusual, you go out to seek support for purposes of augmenting those who are in place.
Yeah.
And I think we are aware of what government is doing. We are acutely aware that there are cabinet subcommittees dealing with this. We are aware that the governors are also doing certain things. We are aware of the Council of Governors. We are aware that the BBI committee is composed of good minds. We are aware of all those things. But that notwithstanding, without downplaying what they are doing, we are simply saying that all these things were being put together pre-COVID. And the committees that have been put together during the COVID period are firefighting committees.
Yes.
We are thinking beyond firefighting. And I think we must be understood in that context. Because otherwise they'll say, oh, they think they know it all. We are not saying we know it all. We are simply saying that some kind of disruptive thinking, which is outside of government, can also help government in terms of ensuring that these processes gain greater traction. That's
because COVID itself is disruptive. I want us to touch on my favorite subject.
Before you touch on it, there's something you said on which I don't agree with you. And you must say that I misunderstood you on the question of bringing back health to the center. I'm not myself of the view that services should be brought to the center, because we must understand, number one, that in the health sector, sometimes services were devolved, but funds did not follow those devolved services. So what we must do going forward is to ensure that the devolution is not only on paper. The devolution must be real devolution, so that when you devolve services, the funds actually follow the devolved services. Which there is a very uncomfortable discussion here, even in agriculture. The ministry still was holding tight certain things. So the central government should remain at the level of policy guidelines, so that there is uniformity throughout the country, and staff are also deployed and enabled through sufficient funding. If that is done, and you who has traveled the world, you has traveled to the United States of America and other parts of the world, you know, when we talk about the state of California, the state of California does not look to the Washington administration for little things. They have very clearly defined areas.
They contribute.
Yes, even in our constitution, the things are defined, but the tragedy with our constitution, which is comparable to that of the Nigerian constitution in terms of, you tell me that I have power to do certain things. And yet, then you give me a spoon to do work that requires a spade. The net effect is that I can't actually deliver.
Prof, I hear you. I hear you. And let me also say, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. You are. But I have a right to be wrong.
Yes.
The context in which I basically was saying that some of these roles should be brought back is, let me talk about doctors. You look at how health workers are mistreated.
Correct.
In fact, in your right mind, do you expect medical workers to go on strike again, asking for salary? I heard the discussion of actually coming up with a commission, a commission like Teacher Service Commission, maybe Doctor Service Commission or Medical Services Commission. Bring those guys back to a commission that actually can manage their remuneration, manage their issues and all of that, and then basically send them to those institutions to deliver, so that they're not worrying about whether they're going to be paid or not. I mean, today, of course, counties are still paying medical workers, but do you think that those medical workers will be getting their salary? I know of counties that are not paid for the last 2 months. And we are sitting here saying that these are really the frontliners. They're the ones who are doing all of this work, and that is the truth, Prof. You can legally say that I am dead, but it's only the doctor that actually can say that I'm dead.
You're clinically
dead. even of corona. So I think that there are, maybe a compromise from our discussion can be that there are certain roles that need to be consolidated and reorganized. But we cannot say that yes, we are now.
I think you have a point in saying that, there was a lot of tension. The devolution of these services was actually the tension between the central administration and the counties.
Yeah.
And for that reason, the ministries of health, which is the central government, was very reluctant to release these services because it has budgetary implications. So they were being left with an empty pot.
Yeah.
And the net effect is that the transmission of funds, counties were sometimes starved of funds.
Yeah.
And when they are starved of funds in any one sector, the political class would possibly deploy funds in an area that makes political sense, the populist sectors, and the professionals were suffering in that regard. So coming back to BBI, just for the sake, you said something that was very important for BBI. I think the COVID intervention has given people time to reflect. I hope so. I hope so. I hope we'll not miss an opportunity such as presented to us, so that during this COVID and when we are looking at the BBI, and remember that the BBI must also take into account other previous work. The Auditor Controller General at that time, Mr. Eddie Ouko, had done an assessment of the effectiveness of the Constitution. So we must ask ourselves, this is an opportunity for us as a country to examine how effectively our Constitution has worked in the critical areas. And it is in all sectors, Mark. If you go into the area of education, if you want agricultural extension officers, you simply want agricultural extension officers. If you want education, you simply want education and that these people are paid. If you go to a hospital, whether it's in Homa Bay or is in Meru, you want your doctors paid, you want your nurses paid. The question that we must ask, and that must be asked as we debate the BBI proposals in a comprehensive and a professional manner, does the governance structure as presently existent, does it help? Is the architecture right? One of the things that we as Kenyans are afraid to speak about is whether we actually need 47 counties. It is something that we don't want to confront because it's a political hot potato. But in private moments, even politicians will tell you, in fact, we don't need them. And that is why when you go to different parts across the country, they are forming economic blocks, because they also know that it is those economic blocks that are actually viable. You go to the western side, they are forming economic blocks, and they say it is these blocks that will... They know that those economic blocks are the things that should be counties. You go to coast, they are forming an economic block. But because we are addressing political emotion, and short-term and narrow ethnic interests, we are going to reserve these counties, and the net effect is that they will be consuming and undermining service delivery. Look now, Mark, Kisii, because it is a county, must have a referral hospital in Kisii. Homa Bay also wants to have a referral hospital.
Not one.
Migori,
we must
Migori, a referral hospital. So we have 47 referral hospitals, level 5 hospitals. Suppose it was one good referral hospital with supporting hospitals at different levels, and Kisumu Hospital should be the referral hospital, and you have another one in Kakamega and another one in Nakuru. They would be properly and thoroughly equipped. Because geographically, these are very short distances. You can have air ambulances and have those other. But everybody is now spread thin because we must have our own referral hospital. What does it do? Service is compromised. You have bureaucracies which must be fed. Therefore, money goes into bureaucracies rather than service delivery. So these are issues. But you said there was a favorite subject.
Definitely. Those are things that I think can be addressed under BBI, and I hope. And so, Corona has really moved me to a point where I'm in full support of re-engineering our governance approach to things. And I hope that the leaders in that context will look at that. No, you know that I'm a clergy.
Yes.
You
are not receiving tithes and offerings
even
now.
though I've not been receiving tithes. And the spiritual element of this, You know, I've seen you preach a couple of times in a number of instances. What is your thought around COVID-19 and the church? But most importantly,
Yes.
how do you see the church going forward?
You know,
And you better be careful what you say.
I'm going to be very careful what I'm saying. Those who want to be fatalistic will say that this is how God is punishing us. In fact, I've heard some of my friends who are clergy telling me, you can see this is a reminiscent of the plagues. We had our locusts. We now have floods. We now have pestilence in Corona.
context of
And
Corona.
they even cite the book of the prophet Isaiah, and they shall be locked into their houses and until they repent.
I have quoted that book.
And so the
For a
nature so that these are the last days. I think some people have even told me that if I'd never repented before, this is the time to repent.
I hope you have.
Because Christ is about to come. Yes. And the truth is that one cannot escape the spiritual dimension of it.
Yes, yes.
We are spiritual beings. I mean, these physical bodies that we acquire and accumulate here on earth
And occupy.
are merely jewel boxes. The real jewel is inside of us.
The soul.
And if you look at it from that dimension, there is a sense in which we've got to ask ourselves whether this is not something that is not something that makes us reflect upon God. We ourselves